I don't want to be a pilot. I want to be a passenger. And what we do is we try and tell our clients that right now you're building products for pilots.
Now the technology has caught up with the ease of use, what the user needs. He doesn't want to remember a complicated password. They just want to be able to log in simply to the website.
Steve Jobs was a genius, right? No question about it. He spent millions and years building that thing, and just to find that out, I mean, he could have done a survey.
Welcome back to Innovation Impossible. In each episode of this podcast, we dive deep into the world of product innovation, bringing you insightful conversations with industry leaders behind some of the coolest products in fields as diverse as smart devices, crypto, fashion, logistics, pharmaceuticals, and many more. Our guests share their processes, challenges, and triumphs in creating groundbreaking products. From who to hire to the systems they create at enterprise companies, from research methodology to marketing, from innovation frameworks to the challenges they faced and how they overcame them. Whether you're a serial entrepreneur working at an enterprise company on an insights or innovation team, you're a product designer, or you just love product design and innovation, Innovation Impossible offers practical lessons and inspiration to help you navigate your own product development journey. Welcome back. We've got an incredible guest with us today, Alistair Rennie, Global Head of Innovation and Thought Leadership at Protocol Theory. Alistair has been connecting the dots between macro trends, consumer behavior, and commercial objectives for over 20 years, driving innovation across some of the most exciting industries of our time. From his time at Google, where he developed the groundbreaking idea of the messy middle, a deep insight into the complex space customers exist in before purchase, to his work with Easy Crypto, helping to shape strategies for the next billion crypto users. Alistair has constantly pushed the boundaries of insight-driven innovation. Whether he's leading thought leadership initiatives or building communities to bridge technical innovation with real-world needs, Alistair's ability to translate complexity into actionable strategies is second to none. And today we're diving into how Alistair has brought fresh thinking to traditional innovation models, his experiences at Google and beyond, and how he sees the future of insights and Web3 innovation shaping up. Alistair, welcome to Innovation Impossible.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. You can share that with me afterwards. I might use it as my bio going forward. Thanks for that.
Awesome. Yeah, will do. Before we dive in, I'd love it if you could share a bit about your journey and how you ended up where you are today.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I guess it all starts when I was a teenager. I was quite entrepreneurial, I guess. And without knowing it, of course, I practiced a very raw form of strategy and cobbled together a few businesses when I was younger, and it just gave me a taste for business and innovating. I went and did a marketing degree in London, and then I joined a research agency. I joined Ipsos, and I spent a few years there. And then I went to work in financial services, still in London, and I headed up an innovation and strategy team there, all still very much driven by insight. That's my jam. And then I went to work for Google. I spent 6 years there, mostly leading global thought leadership efforts. And then I quit that job in London, moved to the other side of the world, and joined a startup crypto exchange, which you mentioned is Easy Crypto. Did a bit of GTM work in SaaS and some consulting after that, and now I work for Protocol Theory, where I am living my best life in Web3.
And so it's insights. Insights is your jam. What is it that motivates you about this field, this industry?
It's understanding what makes people tick, why they do what they do. That for me is what it's all about. And for me, it's so foundational to strategy and innovation. Like I don't know if I'm particularly that creative, like in isolation, but give me some data and I can create, right? So I can start to join the dots, like you say. If I have the right inputs, I can smash stuff together and come up with new solutions to old problems, or something completely new. I love doing that. And so, yeah, insight for me is the driver.
That's amazing, and it's so transferable as well, seemingly from like financial sector to Google to now the crypto space. I imagine these spaces are fairly different, but also like finding those connections, finding those insights that stays constant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I have, like, over the years, from that entrepreneurial teenager, when I didn't realize it, since that point through my entire career over 20, 25 years, I've just been refining this model, which we could talk about a bit if you like. I kind of, it's very, where do you start? There's so much to think about. So I have, I guess, a systematic approach, a very strategic approach to going through that process.
Yeah, let's dive in. What's your model?
All right. Okay. So I guess you can think about it in terms of like a Venn diagram with three circles. Okay. It doesn't matter where you put them, but the first one would be your inputs. Okay. So that might be. I mean, it could be you as a person. It could be your business, a brand. But let's if we're thinking about innovation, let's call it a product. Okay, or a concept or an idea for a product. And the key thing to think about in terms of this system is what are the strengths of what you're building. What's good about it, right? And there's lots of models you can use to do that, but let's keep it there for now. Like, what are the strengths and what's unique about what it is that you're building? So that's your first circle. But whatever it is you're building, to your point, whatever industry it's in, you're not building that in a vacuum. Okay. That is taking exactly right. You're gonna launch it out into the wild. There's so much going on, right? And that's quite daunting to think about. So this provides a bit of a systematic approach to it. So you've got two more circles of that Venn diagram. The first one is the macro trends. Okay, so in here, this is in strategic terms, you'd call it an environmental analysis, and you can use models like you can use a Steepow or a Pestle. But what you're looking for there is thinking about specifically your product, your idea, your concept. What are the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal factors that might be relevant? And that might sound very, very boring, but you don't need to go through it like step by step and just force things to come out. But you need to think about, like, what are the things that are going to be specifically relevant to the thing that I am building? Because you've got to remember, those things are going to be bigger than what you're building, right? And like a big trend in one of those spaces can eat your idea for breakfast. So it's good just to be aware of it. Okay. The other part to that macro picture is understanding the competitive environment. And again, there's a great model for this. Michael Porter's model, I think, is the one I like to use. It's his five forces. So he's thinking about the current players, the new entrants, the suppliers, but also really important, what are the substitutes? And you've got to think about, okay, well, if I'm going to launch this product, like, what is the impact of that competitive environment, and what am I doing that's unique? So that's kind of your macro picture. And again, you can spend a long time on that, but the returns diminish very fast. Okay, so it's not like it's something you get a huge amount of value doing it very, very quickly. If you spend months doing it, the returns diminish quite quickly. But you just want at least to have a view of it.
General picture of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's, like, you can look up, like, to do an environmental analysis. There are really good models in today's age. Actually, you can go and use AI to just say, look, go and run this model for me. In seconds, you've got it. And there's a couple of uses for it, which I'll come on to. And then the last one, and this is so important, that last circle. So the first circle in our Venn diagram is your inputs, like the concept. Second one is this macro environment. The third one is the consumer. So there's a lot you could talk about in here, but what we're really getting at is, in the context of what you're building, what is your intended user trying to do? What's the end game? So the good model to use here is the jobs to be done framework. A lot of your audience will be very familiar with that, and you're looking for what are the pain points and what are the potential painkillers that this user needs. Also in here, really important, is to have a think about, like, what are the big cultural trends. Okay, so there you've got kind of those three circles, and what the system is designed to do is to strategically optimize your concept because you're thinking about issues that are bigger. Whatever you're building, all these issues are, like I said before, they are bigger than your product. And what you want to do is so that it doesn't derail your launch or the adoption of your product, you want to be harnessing these things. And you do that, you can supercharge what you're doing. So this isn't designed to replace the creative minds of founders and innovators. It's just there to help them, to support it. A lot of products will fail because they run into forces that are bigger than their product that they actually could have harnessed instead. Okay, so this has, on the one hand, this is really good for just helping to understand those forces that you need to harness, but it's also really, really good for ideation, right? So you can start to take these different inputs and you can smash them together and you come up with these wonderful new outputs. And I've got a bit of an example of this. But the idea is what you're trying to do. I might go off on a bit of a tangent here, and you can edit this out if you think it's too cheesy. But I borrow from physics here, right? So just like in physics, so if we think big, like think really big, space, okay, what happens is when the right elements start to come together, right, they start to collide. Okay, they create new elements, and then you get a self-sustaining reaction, right? You get fusion, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And what you end up with is a center of gravity, right? It sounds cheesy, right? But you're trying to do the same thing by pulling in these different elements from the macro analysis and the consumer analysis and what it is that makes your concept so good. You smash those together and you'll start to create gravity because you're using big issues, big themes. And that gravity you create, it's going to suck in partners, builders, internal stakeholders, shareholders, investors, and eventually users, because you've taken this strategic approach to building these inputs. So yeah, you want to create that fusion, you want to smash stuff together, and you want to create that gravity with the right inputs.
Oh wow, that's an amazing analogy. Yeah, and I was thinking like you were talking about look at the macro and the consumer and realize like what gaps there are there, and then come up with products to fit those two gaps. But it's even more interesting when you throw an existing product into the mix and you're kind of trying to understand how things can change, how things can evolve, how you can continue to innovate along those lines.
Yeah, exactly right. So within the context of all of that, what value are you creating for your user in that broader context? Really good stimulus.
Okay. And do you have any examples where you've applied this?
I do actually. There's one that I particularly like, that's worth sharing. I think when I was at the post office, which for anyone who doesn't know, the UK post office is like, it's one of the oldest businesses in the world. It's like hundreds of years old. And when I was working there, they had like over 200 products, right? But the business was struggling. They had this one incredibly profitable big business. They were selling billions of pounds, British pounds, in holiday money, travel money, right? So before you go on holiday, you go and get a little bit of cash, which is what you used to do anyway. A lot of people still do actually, but you go and get this bit of cash. And this was big business for the post office, so it was very important to us. So that was my input, right? I thought, well, this is our strength, right? What can we do with that? So then I look at the macro picture and I see that, to keep it short, I can see that the use of cash is declining. I can see that contactless technology is growing, mobile usage is growing, and we're starting to see some mobile wallets. I'm also seeing that travel is increasing. People are traveling more and more. They're going abroad more. They're spending more. And then from the consumer point of view, people wanted to have local currency, but they didn't want to stand in a queue in the post office with people who were trying to buy another 200 different products, right? So I got in a room with people, we put these inputs in, we smashed them together, and we realized, you know what, we've got this to make that holiday travel money business work. We had this huge dealing desk that we had a joint venture with a bank. So we were able to supply white labeled foreign exchange dealing, right? So if we take that, and seeing that mobile is growing and contactless payments are growing, then why don't we just supply mobile wallet providers with foreign currency? And that means our consumer who doesn't want to queue up suddenly has a digital solution. Why don't you just load your phone up, with euros, dollars when you travel, and tap to pay. And so what that did is, because we harnessed these different trends, we started to create that gravity, right? So internally, people were excited about it. They added their ideas to it. We managed to get the buy-in. Externally, I went and knocked on Google's door. I went and spoke to Google Wallet, and I said, what do you think? And they said, yeah, this is good. We had several good meetings with them. So that gravity started to work there as well. It started to bring that in. I had a couple of rounds of pitches with investors, which were reasonably successful, but didn't work out in the end. Ultimately, this idea, mobile wallets, were too nascent. We just didn't have it's. So if you're doing transactions, it's a really high volume business. It probably would have taken 10 years before that would have been profitable. Um, so we never did it. Okay. But as an example of creating that gravity and bringing people in, I think it's a really good example of that. And personally, even though it never took off through various sort of different things, like I ended up working at Google because of it, so it worked out. So yeah, we didn't launch it. A good example of that gravity, I think.
And it's a need, I feel. And I've actually, so I spend time in Armenia where they actually let you open bank accounts in different currencies. So I have USD and a euro and a British pound credit cards, and I can just use those when I travel without commission, without fees. And I'm really glad. Like, I didn't have that when I lived in Spain. When I lived in the UK, there weren't those options weren't available.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? The card version of that product is what essentially happened, and while it wasn't we while we did actually have one of those, what that process that I described went through helped us to do was to really start to allocate resource into that space, because now we had the business course that sat behind it, and so actually the post office now do have like a very very successful card product, and of course it's I believe it's contactless. So it never made it
Yeah.
to the mobile, but that whole same idea lives in card format. I should have mentioned that,
Oh.
but yeah.
That's great. And so, yeah, actually, the post office was going to be one of my questions later on, but since we touched on it now, it's a 400-year-old governmental brand. I imagine it's pretty entrenched. Like, how hard was it to challenge this status quo? How do you change not only behavior within the company, but also consumer behavior? I imagine there's a lot of things where people are just used to sending posts. Or let me rephrase that. You're actually trying to maintain a certain level of behavior in a changing world, because now there's email, there's SMS, there's chat apps, but the post office still needs to remain relevant. So they're having to reinvent themselves, but I imagine it's a pretty difficult process.
Yes,
Can
it
you?
is. I mean, there's the one thing they have on their side is they have this brand that people trust. Okay, you can do a lot with that. Okay, so you can get people to try stuff. The flip side is that you can't get it wrong, right? Because
Yeah.
you lose the trust. Like you can only mess around with that so much. But I found that it's that process I'm talking about and I really did start to develop it more thoughtfully and more systematically when I was at post office. It was having the data. So specifically in that travel money case, it was having the data to show, look, this profitable part of your business is being eroded by a trend. People are using cash less. That's happening here. It's happening overseas. I had data. So look, Visa transactions, the volume is increasing every year overseas. The volume of usage of cash is going down. Luckily, I had there was government data, really good data on this, so I didn't even have to spend money on it. I just had
Yeah.
it. But that's all part of that process. When you go, and you'll be surprised what data is available. So it was all about building the business case, and then a little bit cheeky. I created a little bit of fear. I threw some case studies in. I said, look what happened to Kodak. They were the first people to develop a digital camera that didn't support it with the resource, and look how that went. Used a few case studies, but mostly I think I was young at the time, and I was working with the people with a lot of experience, and I asked them for help. And by doing so, I got them interested, and I got their buy-in. Again, it's creating that gravity. Part of one of the inputs to create that gravity is people, right, and expertise. And when I first joined the post office, I learned the hard way. I went in like a bull in a china shop. I said, "Oh, look at this data, and we should be doing this." It didn't work. So learning process for me, I was like in my early 20s. I'm not saying that everyone in their early 20s is like that. I was, unfortunately. Good learning experience. So yeah, I used the expertise of others in the business instead of like trying to get, I guess, buy-in. I tried to get their investment because people look after their investments, right? So rather than
Yeah.
sell them something, get their investment.
That seems to be a common thread in these conversations. The
Right.
idea of like knowing who to reach out to and building that network. It's not only about what you can do by yourself or your team. It's also understanding who the players in the company are and who you need for the expertise, for the buy-in, for the investment, whatever it is, who you can approach and sell and pitch those ideas to.
Yeah, it's powerful, right? You've got that and some data and a business case. That's compelling.
Okay, moving on. You mentioned Google. That sounds pretty interesting. You worked in this enterprise setting with teams that sometimes I imagine there's the Google graveyard. There's a lot of products that get abandoned, even though they're heavily invested in. There's a lot of R&D. What do you think? What are the main factors that contribute to these decisions? How does that play out?
Yeah, big question. I think a lot of I guess there's a lot of reasons why Google decides to kill a product or deprecate it. Was the term they use. Sometimes technology just becomes obsolete. Sometimes it's superseded by something else. But I think, um, generally speaking, if those products aren't around anymore, it's because they didn't have enough users and they weren't generating enough revenue. If they were, we'd still have them, right? And Google's got what, like, I don't know, 8, 9 like amazing products that are like the best products, some of the best products in the world. Any one of them would make one of the world's most successful businesses
Yeah,
ever. Yeah. It's certainly not a criticism, but the flip side is that a lot of those products are quite old. One of them, the second most successful one, arguably, is an acquisition. Well, not maybe. Well, I mean, YouTube was an acquisition. I can't rank them. That's not right for me to do that. I think there's obviously there's a real challenge there because they've got like nearly 300 products that Google have launched that they've made some investment in
wow.
that are no longer around, right? So their hit rate, um, isn't great. It's probably aligned with the overall hit rate for new product launches in the world. But I think that's they're missing something there, right? Because that like most product launches, they don't have like
All that data, all that experience, all that money.
right
Yeah.
and the brand, which is one of the most recognizable brands in the world, right? So with that gives them a massive advantage. I think they should have a better hit rate. Why do I think it's the case? So I didn't work. Caveat is I didn't work in the engineering team, in the engineering organization of Google. I worked in the marketing organization. So you've got tens of thousands of people in that engineering bit. There's tens of thousands more people in the marketing bit. They're completely separate organizations. Okay, which is a shame
Is that
because
maybe part of the problem?
exactly my
So the
point. Right?
engineers are developing products, but they're not understanding, say, those macro and the consumer needs. So there isn't that gravity around their idea.
This is exactly my point. And they don't need it because Google can, again, I don't want to criticize what a great company, right? But they can just throw resource at something, get it built. But yeah, there's a whole army of us in that marketing organization trying to understand why people do what they do and what they want and, what they think and what makes them tick. And none of that data got used in product development ever. Just in my tenure, I can think of some of the products that didn't make it. There were messaging apps, video like Google Allo, I think was one, Google Duo, Google Plus, which was a social media app. I mean, most of the products that I saw them bring to market were Google versions of something that already existed.
Yeah.
So they were missing that stimulus, but obviously they had like so many talented engineers and so much money. Let's just build it and see what happens. And Google's philosophy was, the best way to predict the future is to create it, which is wonderful, right? But I think you can create the future, but without actually understanding those bigger forces, which are they're way more powerful than Google, right? you're just, I don't know, you're limited, you're reducing the chance of success. There are some good frameworks that you can use to improve the chance of success, but for Google, while they do want to understand the user, they wait till they build a product, and then they've got really good UX teams who go and do the research on what they've built. But yeah, for all the data we had on this is the cultural trends that are shaping the whole context that you're launching this product into. Yeah, that was yeah, completely separate. So that I absolutely think that's a large part of the reason why they have
Yeah.
300 products, because they didn't leverage a strength that they had in understanding behavior.
And especially there's a gap between this idea of creating the future and um, like copying what other people are doing. It doesn't really align, especially with things like Google Plus. I remember when that showed up and trying to kind of like weigh up the option, should I be on Facebook or Google Plus? Obviously Facebook won that battle.
Yeah, exactly. And there's what you're building needs to be, in some way, shape, or form, needs to be better. If you're gonna, you can do second but better, right? You don't have to be first mover. Second but better often wins, but it can't just be second.
Yeah.
The strategy, by definition, is second but better. And if you want to make it better, I think you need to have a good. Yes, there's always tech that can make something better, but you got to supercharge it by understanding those human needs, right?
Okay, and that segues really nicely into this thing that you developed at Google, the idea of the messy middle. Can you explain a bit, like what is it, how does it work, and how did it shape, say, what you did at Google, and then maybe after that?
I don't know how interesting that will be for your audience, so I'll keep it short. I think what might be interesting is that I used that same process, right? So I had my three circle Venn diagram. I brought good people into the room. So on the one hand, we had Google, very very credible business with a lot of absolutely had the right to talk about consumers and how they behave. Our problem is that people always thought about, all we do is talk about Google products. So that was the kind of the input. The macro environment was that people were not just using Google, they're using to search for products. That had exploded. People were now using, there's a lot of search engines, right? That people are using, and price comparison sites, and all sorts of things. Like, Google no longer had a monopoly on that, and we had to have appreciation of that. The other thing we noticed, or that in that group, is that behavioral science was becoming very, very popular in marketing. And then looking at consumers, again, it was kind of more of that. We knew that because of all these different ways, all these different touch points, is that this journey of buying something was no longer linear. So we used to have like the brand, we still have the brand funnel, like awareness, consideration, purchase, loyalty. Like it's no longer linear. And when we smashed all of that together, we thought, right, well, let's have Google not talk about its product, but use behavioral science to understand this non-linear journey. And out of that came this new understanding of how consumers make a decision. It would take like, how can I sum it up? Instead of having this linear journey, what we found is that whatever a shopper is doing in the messy middle, like if you're on a comparison site or social media or Google or Amazon, wherever you are, mentally, you're only doing one or two things. Okay, you're either exploring or you're evaluating. And you go back and forward through this loop of exploration and evaluation. And once we figured that out, we figured out that actually, because there is so much choice and there's so much information, like, what's the brain doing to process that, manage that choice and process that information? And we identified 6 behavioral nudges that the brain uses, often subconsciously, to actually make that choice and to help evaluate and to help explore a category, and then ultimately come out of this kind of infinite loop and make a purchase. So that's that in a nutshell. But I
No.
think, again, from a more of an innovation point of view, again, it was using that same systematic approach, bringing in elements that were bigger than Google, using them to supercharge what we did. And we produced this. We published the work on it, and I'm told it was the most read thing that Google have ever published globally ever. And we did that by taking that approach and building that gravity.
This episode is brought to you by prelaunch.com, the consumer and product validation platform. Why trust your innovation to market research dinosaurs who still rely on professional panelists to gather insights that you'll probably never use? When you pay your respondents to participate, their only incentive is to get through it fast and get paid. This practice has led to the growth of professional respondents, low-quality responses, and even bots. Instead, on prelaunch.com, your future customers pay you before sharing their insights. Regular users discover your product via ads while browsing the internet, and if they actually want to buy it, they can place a small deposit to reserve it. This confirmation of purchase intent changes everything. Now, instead of straight lining through the answers in order to get paid, they're actually invested in your product development process. Their only goal is to co-create a better product for themselves. Prelaunch.com lets you test everything from pricing to product features, business models, audiences, messaging, positioning, and everything in between. Discover how you can gather bulletproof insights from your ready-to-buy customers on prelaunch.com today. No, it sounds like a fascinating concept, and I think especially the insight specialists in our audience would be interested in it. It kind of reminds me of this idea in marketing where we try to have lots of touch points. So we're using ads, influencer marketing, SEO, and everything so that user gets hit at least, I don't know, 10 times by this product in his network within, I don't know, a week. And that's what, moves that purchase decision along.
Yeah, and the trick is to understand what are you trying to what's you're going from. First of all, you start in this exploration phase, and there are certain nudges that might help you to push someone to help them do those comparisons. But then when you get to the evaluation stage, you might use other nudges to help them actually start to evaluate the product. So that was a nuance. It's about, okay, you can blast people with this stuff, but actually think about taking someone from exploration to evaluation and help them to do that.
And trying to force that linear journey again, or just accepting that it's never going to be linear again. And
The latter, for sure. The latter, for sure. What you want to do is you want to help people to do it. You don't want to force, because it's fun for people. People, like, it's not hard to do, right? Pick up your phone, look for stuff. Like, people, I mean, some categories, like, I don't know, insurance maybe is not so fun. But we tested this across 30 products, and what we did is we made up 30 fake products across 30 different categories, completely fictional, and we put them into this simulated purchase environment. And by using the right nudges to help people to explore and evaluate, we were getting people to buy these products that no one had ever heard of before, instead of their favorite shampoo or their favorite bank or favorite credit card, whatever it is. And consistently across 30 products, everything from cereal to mountain bikes to the ones I've mentioned already, we were able to disrupt the purchase, by using these nudges and having an understanding of exploration and evaluation. It's fun.
wow. And that's in the messy middle article, yeah?
Yeah. Well, it's a big book, but there's a few videos lying around. There is a short article. There's a couple of videos lying around, and there's a pretty chunky ebook of like 100 pages. if
Oh,
you
wow.
really want to go down that rabbit hole.
I'll definitely dive into it, and we'll leave the link in the description. So if
Thanks,
anybody's
thanks, Dan.
interested, they can follow up as well.
Thanks.
Okay, and jumping to today. So now you're in the crypto and Web3 space. And I'm curious because I see it's a fairly technical niche. And it's reaching its more broader mass appeal. But I imagine there's this gap between the technical founders who know about the underlying technology and the mainstream market who really just kind of hears about Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum. So what's your approach to bridging this disparity? How do you educate these technical group? Not only how do you educate the audience, but how do you educate the technical groups about the market needs beyond their innovation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and obviously the job is far from done. I think there's I think the first thing is that there is a tendency, certainly in tech driven and product driven industries, to really undervalue the role of research, right? part of the reason for this is because we love to throw around quotes like from Henry Ford and Steve Jobs. Henry Ford was what did he say? If I asked
About the
people what
horse.
they wanted, they would have said, "Finish it off for me, Dan."
A faster horse?
They would have said a faster horse, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of weird because Henry Ford, he didn't invent the car, right? They probably would have said, "Oh, I want a car," because who did it? It was Benz. I forget his first name. Charles Benz. Um, Charles. It wasn't Charles. Someone Benz. Who was it? Are you googling it for me, Dan?
Yeah.
Carl. His name was Carl. Carl Benz invented the motor car, and like a long time before Henry Ford launched the Model T, right? So it's kind of a weird quote, but people pick up on it and they take it like that's you. You can't ask people what they want. You need to be saying like, okay, well, you need to be asking people what don't you like about riding a horse? You know, what annoys you about it? Like, what are you using it for? How many people are you traveling with? How far are you going? These are the questions you ask, and then you can start to. Then he might have come up with an innovation, but yeah, so I think that's the wrong. So one, he didn't invent the car, so it annoys me. But two, like that would be the wrong question to ask. And then we've got Steve Jobs said something similar, right? He said, "I never rely on market research because something like people don't know what you want until you show it to them." But like, I mean, Steve Jobs was a genius, right? No question about it, and he got it right far more often than he got it wrong. But when he left Apple, he made this he made that product that
The next.
next,
Yeah.
right? His target market didn't want it, they didn't need it, he couldn't afford it. He spent millions and years building that thing. Just to find that out, I mean, he could have done a survey. He could have just done a survey and he would have known actually what's really cool about what I've built is this operating system inside it, and that's going to change the world. And he could have saved all of those years and all of those millions. And the reality is that
Developing
even
a
if
perfect cube. No?
yes,
Like a
yeah, yeah,
magnesium cube.
over-engineered cube like that he cared about, no one else did, right? And well, I mean, it looked nice, but it was really expensive, right? And literally, he
Yeah.
could have just done a quick survey, and they would have said, "Nah, this is good. I like your interface, but you can keep the rest." And the reality is, right, even for I'm sure there are some geniuses who tune into your podcast, but they probably don't have the years and the millions to just play this kind of product roulette with, right? So I think there's a real need for. So yeah, going back to the somehow going back to the question, I think that in blockchain, Web3, crypto, we have builders who are fascinated by this tech. It's general technology, right? It can be applied so much. It's revolutionary, okay? And so, we think in these terms like Steve Jobs and Henry Ford. I don't need the market research. I know what I'm doing. But the thing is that it's not to replace the creativity of these brilliant builders who are building amazing stuff, right? It's just to help to augment it and to understand the place that you're playing into and what people need. But because a lot of Web3 builders and crypto builders, they love the tech. They want to educate other people on the tech. And this is a problem because mainstream adopters do not care about tech. Okay.
Yeah.
Categorically, they don't. Like people do not know about TCP/IP, but they use the internet. An even better example is we know from our research at Protocol Theory that nearly 80% of people either have no idea or have only really heard of it. They have no idea really what transaction layer protocols are. Sorry, not secure socket layers. Do you know what that is? Do you know what secure socket layers are? You probably
I
do
couldn't
because
break it down, no, but
but
yeah,
it's
something to do
most
with
people.
websites and
Yes,
encryption.
that's right. That's right. Okay. Most people have no idea what this is, but it's secure. It encrypts your credit card details when you're shopping online, right? So we happily spend trillions of dollars every year shopping online, and we don't care what secure socket layers are, right? But in crypto,
We
we're spending a
trust that
lot.
it works.
Yeah, but we've never even heard of it. It just works, right? But we don't care about
Yeah.
the technology. Like we never read any white paper on how secure socket layers or transmission layer protocols work, right? We just use it. It works. Thanks very much. But in crypto and Web3, because we love the tech so much, and we want to share our passion. We're trying to educate people on this is what blockchain is. No other
Yeah.
consumer facing business has really ever felt the need to do that. Understanding the underlying tech is not a prerequisite for adoption. Like we've done this research across so many different, like we've done, like people don't understand. We know for a fact that they know just about as much about blockchain as they do about large language models and neural networks. But ChatGPT got 1 million users in like 5 days or something like that. And they didn't even mention anything about the tech, just an interface, prompt, done. And so we've seen that like time and time and again. So I think that a big challenge there, we've got technical founders who are, they're incredibly smart, but they're so talented and they have a passion for the tech and they want to share their passion, but they're missing the point that what we need to do is just communicate this to everyday mass market utility. That's what's going to drive adoption ultimately.
Yeah. It might be a bit tangential, but it reminds me of the idea of passwords. I'm a stickler for secure, long, mixed passwords. But people have been going on about this for the past 30 years, trying to tell people you need to have a secure password. Your passwords can't be the same on every site or whatever. But nobody cares. And like, no matter how much I tell my wife, her password is still pretty simple. Um, but now with this like touch ID or the face recognition, I'm not sure what it's called, the keyless or whatever it is, that phones now enable you to do passwordless access to these things. Now the technology has caught up with the like ease of use, what the user needs. He doesn't want to remember a complicated password. They just want to be able to log in simply to the website. And no matter how much you explain the need for the complicated password, they weren't going to do it.
No, don't care. Yeah, we just want stuff that works and it's easy to do. And that's a good example of, technology just, there's a job to be done and technology being able to do it without the user having to understand it.
And so we see this a lot in similar, like complicated products in health tech or AI, especially now. There's a lot of products launching on pre launch that the founder is overly invested in their idea, in the tech, in the product that they've developed. And they're trying to sell it on this like complicated, like their complexity and how amazing it is without understanding the customer insight, without understanding what it is that the customer actually needs. And I wonder, like, from your experience in blockchain and with these blockchain products, are there any particular insights that have helped you cross the chasm for these blockchain products, breaking down these complex ideas, translating the value prop for the general audience? What's something that these, especially these startups and newer creators, what strategies can they use to pitch their products to their consumers?
Yeah, it's another big question. We've got some big questions today, Dan. So yeah, I mean, there are some products that are starting to cross the chasm in crypto. And it's interesting when we talk about crossing the chasm, right? We're talking about going from the innovators and the early adopters to the first majority and the late majority. And one of the first problems we ran into, and we talk in those terms. And so
That's the
that's,
adoption curve, right?
yes, that's right. It's a diffusion of innovation model from Everett Rogers, published in is actually published in 1962, right? And this is part of the problem. It's really old, and people look at it and go, "This is a load of rubbish," because like, how can Facebook get 1 million users in just 10 months and Spotify in just 5 months? This whole adoption diffusion thing is out of the window. People just get it, and so actually we did some work on that protocol theory, and we thought, you know what, maybe it is a bit outdated. It's kind of old, and we've had globalization, we've had the internet, we've had smartphones, we've got social media, we've got all of this data. Can it really be that first of all you get the innovators and then the early adopters? And we looked, and actually, yeah, like if you look at the adoption of ChatGPT or Uber or like smart home speakers, like we've got the data on it. See, absolutely, adoption was led by the innovators and then the early adopters and then the first majority. The difference is that it's just happening really, really fast, because all of those things that I've mentioned, like internet, social media, smartphones, like your smartphone is like an innovation adoption fire hose, right? So yeah, that model is still relevant. It still happens. It's just been supercharged, and so it happens really really fast. And so
And there's a
we
lot
show.
more people, I imagine, in each of those early categories. There's a lot more innovators now online innovating, adapting that technology, the early adopters. There's just a lot more people with the telephone access, with computer literacy. It's just easier to get those people on board. Is that right?
Absolutely right. So it's easier to be an innovator now. It's easier to be an early adopter, and people, want to be. There was some study in America, and it said that something like 40% of kids wanted to be influencers, right? You've got all we've made all the things that innovators and early adopters need to really drive that social system. Plus, to your point, there are now twice as many innovators and twice as many early adopters than there were when that model was first published. And so that's really good to know, because it's about how do you use them. They have particular characteristics, right? I could bore you with, but essentially the innovation gets passed from one group to the next, but these groups have particular characteristics, and if you can tune into that, then you can really leverage those behaviors to diffuse your innovation and to cross the chasm. And so one of the things we do, going back to your question, is that we are showing our clients. We say, look, this is how many innovators and early adopters are using your product, and we can show them that, look, you are reaching saturation in terms of the innovators, right? And you're almost there with the early adopters. Now that you have these communities, because like the one thing that crypto has, probably in a more powerful expression than any other product on the planet, is communities who will
Yeah.
go to war for crypto, right? There's no big community for Uber users. There's no big like a whole bunch of innovations, but crypto, yeah, these people are really like the community
Passionate.
around it. Passion, man, like you don't see in any other product category, really, I think.
Yeah.
And so like you've got these, but look, your big opportunity now is the first majority and the late majority, right? This is like where your opportunity is, and they don't care about tech. Like we try and make the point that these people even get on an airplane and they don't care how it stays in the air. We've got that data as well. Like we actually did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So even when your life depends on it, they don't care. They want to know, how is the airplane going to get me to my destination? It's like, I don't want to be a pilot. I want to be a passenger. And what we do is we try and tell our clients that right now you're building products for pilots, and you really do. Like even just to make a crypto transaction, like you have to know, like, am I using the right flight path, and am I going to get hijacked, and all sorts of things like that. But if you're a pilot, you do that. But most people, they want to be passengers. So we try and make this point to our clients, and we use the other thing that Everett Rogers did is he came up with these 5 factors of adoption. They are observability, trialability, complexity, compatibility, and relative advantage. Right, and 40 years ago, he proved that the products that score well on these 5 factors achieve mass adoption. Products that don't, they don't achieve mass adoption, right? But that's very, very old. So we updated it, right? We looked at it across 8 recent innovations, and yeah, these 5 factors of adoption, they still absolutely work. Okay, so if when you have a low score on these, you have low adoption. And crypto currently has a low score across all of these. Other products that have a low score are also like Web3 apps, virtual reality headsets, electric cars. They all score well. Actually, electric cars scored very high on
Has
observability,
shifted
but
recently.
yeah, but it's still very niche level of adoption, nowhere near mainstream adoption. Good score on observability, but the trialability and the other scores aren't particularly good. And yeah, it's interesting to see how some of those other products, like how they scored so highly across these 5 factors. And so we use those, we show those to our clients and say, look, if you want to drive mass adoption, you need to be thinking about scoring higher on these 5 factors of adoption.
I mean, I have some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, and I have like a little guide that I've written for myself because I don't do too many transactions. And every time I need to check up on my guide, right? What are the steps? What am I opening? What am I checking?
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. Like you got to be a pilot, like I say, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not that familiar with the space, so I'm sure like other people have covered this much better. But I wonder, like, I always thought with the NFTs, again, they're trying to sell you on this the technology. They're trying to, I don't know, the art, the idea of the art. But I feel like again, it would be much simpler just integrated into our everyday actions. Like you buy a concert ticket, and that concert ticket is a non fungible token. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. You don't see it, you're not interacting with it, but that is your unique concert ticket or train ticket or like, I don't know, just a more familiar use case that identifies this as yours on the blockchain. You've bought it. You can sell it on to somebody else. It could be property. It could be there's so much potential in that space, but I think we're hung up on the blockchain side of it instead of the actual like what does a market need?
I completely agree. It's there's I think part of it's been driven by the culture, which has been very very powerful, like the digital art. So like Bored Ape Yacht Club, I don't know if you're familiar with that. You know, there's like I think
Yeah, yeah.
10,000 different pictures of slightly different apes with some kind of different hat, something like that. Um,
And they were
hugely
selling for hundreds and thousands of dollars, no? Hundreds of thousands.
millions. I think
Yeah.
millions. Some of them could go for millions. And
And
yeah,
that was
that
the
was
hype of the early adopters?
yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But particularly wealthy early adopters, well, so innovators really. And yeah, the problem with that is that that's more of a speculation fueled thing. Look, I'm not knocking it. Like obviously, I don't own one. I didn't have millions to spend on one. It's not for me, but I think as a cultural demonstration, like a really powerful cultural demonstration, um, I think it's really interesting. It's kind of similar without going off on too much of a tangent. It's like similar to meme coins. I don't know if you're familiar with things like
Yeah, yeah.
Doge or Shiba Inu, or more recently, there's a lot of these things now. Their combined market capitalization is multi billions. And yeah, a lot of them have outperformed Bitcoin and other cryptos in the last year, like by orders of magnitude, right? I think it's a powerful cultural expression, but that speculation, as exciting as it is, it distracts people from actually all the wonderful things that you can do with this technology. And we've worked with a global brand on this, helping them to look at what they're doing in the space. I can't say too much about it, of course, but it was it's easy to get caught up in trying to make something exclusive, which feels like culturally that's what you want to do. You want to do something exclusive. It's like I own it, it's mine, it's unique. But what you do at that point is you by definition, if it's exclusive, you're excluding people. And the idea of Web3 is that we're making a decentralized internet, a more equitable internet. And when you make something where there's only 10,000 and they cost a fortune, you're kind of missing the opportunity to create the network effects that could have, well, by letting people have concert tickets to your point that they can own and they can train. I can't make that concert, so I'm going to trade it with someone who can go. It just so happens that they've got a voucher for a hotel, which is also an NFT. I'm going to swap it for that.
Yeah.
I find that concept is really simple, but it's really exciting if you look at loyalty programs. Um, like millions and millions of people sign up for them. The rate of redemption is tiny. No one does it because the thing expires. It's a hassle to redeem it. You know, if you move all of that on chain and you create this community where people can trade it, you're like, actually, like this thing isn't relevant to me right now. But Dan's got this concert ticket. I can trade my book voucher with him. That could be really powerful. I think there's so much that brands can do there, and it's just going to take time. It's just going to take time to start working beyond the technology. What might happen is that the big incumbent Web2 companies will realize the power of an NFT, and get the drop on the Web3 creators. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think that's a very real risk.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same. Because it is the use case is so obviously there, but it's just kind of trying to, I don't know, get the Web3 get that gravity basically that you were talking about at the start.
Yeah,
The great product, it works. There's these macro trend, there's the consumer's needs, and there it fits. It all matches together, but for some reason nobody's quite cracked it yet.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Um, And that actually leads us into the next question. I mentioned before that a lot of the products that launch on prelaunch.com, they're set to launch in the future, maybe a year away, 6 months away, up to 2 years away. And our partners sometimes wonder what to do with these communities that they're building, these co-creators who come together to give feedback, give insights, suggestions, and help improve this product before the launch. And I imagine it's the same in Web3. There's this promised light at the end of the tunnel. There's this idea, this vision that we're all working towards, but the ecosystem still isn't there. It still has to grow to fill this vacuum, fill this idea. How do you keep these communities engaged? What kind of insights are there to like build these communities on something that isn't there yet?
Do you know what? Crypto and Web3 is such a good example of that, right? Because what you give to the community in crypto is you give them a token. That token is represents so many things. There's so many different ways of putting it. There's so many nice ways of putting it. There's so many interesting aspects of human behavior that you can leverage to talk about it. But it means you might make a lot of money ultimately by holding this token, right? And having that token also makes you part of a community that if you no longer have the token, you no longer have that belonging in that community. So that's two really incredibly powerful things. Like you can go all the way to Maslow hierarchy of needs and think which boxes you're ticking there, like you belonging, right? And like you might make lots of money. So what's that? I can't remember which one that is, but basically like having shelter, right? Having money, having means, having a house, owning a home. Like all of those dreams are, people like, I mean, crypto can deliver that. You can 5, 10, 100x your investment. So that is a really good way to keep a community engaged. You give them skin in the game, and blockchain allows you to do that. I think probably the best way for companies to do it would be to look at how they could create a token around their product. And why this would be so cool is because the problem is in crypto. So I won't be popular for saying this, but a lot of the time we build tokens and then we try to build a business around the token. Your clients who are innovating are building products, they're building businesses. If you were to build the token on top of that, then I think this is a more sustainable way to do business. But you can call it what you want. I think probably part of the key is not to even call it crypto or a token in these cases, because otherwise, I mean, only currently, but yeah, currently like global crypto adoption is less than 10%. So if you say I'm going to reward you with crypto, then you're not relevant to 9 out of 10 people, right? It's not going to work. But if you can reward them with something, it just happens to be on the blockchain, call it whatever you want, don't mention blockchain, then you've got a community who start to become passionate. They have something that shows they're a member of that community. It could be an NFT, just don't call it that, but it should have some utility, like give them access to events, a launch date, gives them access to a discount when the product eventually comes out, gives them access to forums where they can have their input. I think I like yeah, thinking out loud. I think that would be. Do you know what? I would love to speak to some of your clients and say, "Hey, maybe like as a test, let's try and do something." There are companies who have got off the shelf blockchain solutions that can do this, and we can take it off the shelf. We can give your community a wallet. We don't have to call it a wallet. We don't have to call it blockchain, and we can just start using the really good, powerful utility of NFTs and tokenized communities and gated access, as we call it. Could build something really special. After the podcast, maybe we should talk about that a bit more. It'd be
Yeah,
really
I love the
interesting.
idea. Especially, I mean, there's the old school way, and I think a couple of brands did this where they had a signature edition or something. So it's still the physical product, but say the first thousand. So if you're reserving it on pre-launch, you get it signed by the founder, or it's got some exclusive edition. And so I imagine the resale value, especially if it's something bigger like a, I don't know, mountain bike, electric motorcycle, car, or something like that, it's a signature edition. It's got more resale value. But the idea of NFTs also sounds interesting. So the person leaving the deposit, making the reservation, they hold on to this NFT. Again, we're not calling it that. We're not, but they can sell that on to somebody else. They can trade it. So I don't want this, I don't know, phone anymore, or like this future phone that's upcoming. But now there's only 2 months left. I reserved it when it was $50. Now reserving it is $100, for example. And you can sell that on to somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. It can be a voucher. It can be badges. You can get multiple badges. The longer you stay on, you get another badge. And you can have that badge can be what you use on. You can use it in social media, and it can give you access to events that the founder is running. There's a lot you can do with it other than just sell it on, right? It can be traded. It can give you access. It can be used to portray some kind of social status, which might sound wishy washy, but this is very very powerful for human beings, right? To be able to do that. So yeah, I think that could be really interesting, and there might be a way. I'm really going for it now, but it might make more sense to syndicate that community, right? So rather than you've got a client and a product with a community, you could have a community that stretches across multiple products. And then those community can have multiple badges depending on which products that they've shown an interested in. And then you can make it more interchangeable and tradable throughout that community. Again, I'd love to talk more about this, Dan, because then you can create a lot of efficiencies, right? Rather than one company who's already trying to bring a new product to market, might be a new startup, so isn't going to have loads of funds to this, but maybe collectively as a
You
syndicate of
got the
companies.
network effects,
Yes,
exactly. Different products,
exactly.
different people.
Right. And
Yeah, that
then,
sounds fascinating. Let's.
Metcalfe's law, right, is you start to build the network, you square the value of it as more users. And if you've got a bigger community, it's more valuable because someone who's interested in this new air cleaning innovation might want to trade their voucher with someone who's trading with I can't think, I have seen some examples on your website recently, but it escapes me right now. But there is an air cleaning product on there I saw, which was very interesting. But
Oh, that is fascinating, and definitely let's dive let's dive into it in more depth
yeah, yeah, for sure.
after the podcast. Okay, I mean, let's wrap it up. This was an amazing conversation. I'm really glad you could join us. I wonder if there's any kind of like final advice that you want to leave innovators, insights managers with. Like, what's something that they can focus on? Maybe in this crypto space, maybe I don't know, like how current you are with the AI space, like how things are changing.
I'm gonna. So I did a podcast earlier today, and I finished it off with a little thought actually. And this is very crypto Web3 oriented, but my finishing thought to leave you on was so in crypto we talk about protocols, right? That's what we build. We build protocols. So I made the point that protocols enable people, but ultimately it's the people who decentralize the protocol. So what that means is that we can build this wonderful tech, okay, but it's the people who are going to pick it up and take it and use it. And thinking more broadly beyond crypto, you need people out there who are going to pick up your product and take it so that others can see them using it and can see the benefits of it. This is actually a really powerful driver of adoption, is being able to understand the benefits. I can see other people using it. I can see the benefits of using it. So yeah,
And I can
empowering
explain
people
them.
to, yes,
I can
yeah,
explain them to other people. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So take your innovators and your communities of early adopters, like nurture them, but then like how do you incentivize them and empower them to take your product across that chasm into that majority? Caught me off guard there,
Well,
Dan. I hope that worked.
yeah, no, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Alistair. That was a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners will love it.
I hope so, Dan. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, I think there's some exciting conversations that you and I could have off the back of this. So yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you for joining. Bye bye.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today for another Innovation Impossible story. I hope you enjoyed the insights and all the practical advice as much as I did. Please give us a like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We're just starting out, and like innovating, this feels impossible. And head on over to YouTube and let us know if anything resonated with you or if you completely disagreed with anything, and we can spark some healthy debate into the world of innovation and insights. Thanks again to our sponsor, prelaunch.com, our guests for joining, and you for listening today. And see you again in a couple of weeks.